Well, good morning, friends. Welcome back to those of you who have been doing some Thanksgiving traveling. You may know, by the way, that Jared and I, along with about 22 other Wilshire folks, have been doing some traveling recently. I think we traveled maybe a little bit farther than you did for your Thanksgiving travels. At least I hope so. I hope none of you had to endure 24 hours on an airplane to get to Thanksgiving, but if you did, good for you for surviving. Anyway, the 24 hours that we endured on an airplane was to get us to Israel for the recent Wilshire trip to the Holy Land, and we wanted to share, first of all, how thankful we are to you as a congregation for providing the opportunity for all 4 residents to be able to go on that trip, to not make us fight amongst each other for who got to be the one person to go, and also to share a little bit with you of the things that we learned, the gleanings of our own experiences, because it was a wonderful, transformative trip. And there's a lot to tell, a lot more than we can pack into just a few minutes on Sunday, but we wanted to give you just a taste. So I'll start by asking Jared. Jared, what was your favorite part of the trip to Israel?
I'll echo Aaron first by just saying thank you. I think that my favorite place that we visited was the ancient site of Magdala, the home of Mary Magdalene. It is located right on the western side of the Sea of Galilee with the Mount of Arbel just to the south. So it's a beautiful place, but it's really significant recently because in 2009 they unearthed an archaeological find while excavating for a hotel. And what they found was a synagogue from the 1st century, the time of Jesus. So there are still frescoes and mosaic tile floor that's still intact, and it's likely that that floor is one of the places where Jesus walked. Pretty amazing that just in the last decade they have found this ancient site. So it was a beautiful place to be, and there's now a chapel there with an atrium to celebrate Mary Magdalene. And there are pillars around the atrium with different women from the New Testament honored in the atrium. People like Susanna and Joanna and the women that Mark mentions as following Jesus. But there's also a blank pillar for all of the unnamed women of the New Testament and the women across time who have followed Jesus. So that site, to me, was just a really beautiful place where the ancient and the modern come together. Mm-hmm. Aaron, what about you? What was one of the more significant places for you?
So one of my favorite places that we got to go to was a town you may not have heard of before. It's a Roman city called Sepphoris, and it's a place actually where I've been a number of times before as an archaeologist. I got to excavate there when I was in college. And so it was wonderful to come back and to reintroduce myself and the people on the trip to this place, but it's an incredible place for a number of reasons. It's the big city adjacent to Nazareth, so it's likely that Jesus and Joseph would have worked there doing day labor because Nazareth was a tiny, tiny village. But it's also important not just to Christians, excuse me, but also to our Jewish brothers and sisters as well, because Sepphoris is the place where a part of the Jewish larger body of interpretation called the Mishnah was actually written down in the 2nd century by a man named Judah the Prince. And at that point in time, there were Christians and Jews and Roman pagans all living and coexisting in this one space together. And there's really interesting evidence for a sort of cultural exchange between the different peoples. So the house that we believe was the house of the rabbi has these beautiful Greco-Roman mosaics on them that actually tell traditional mythic stories, like the drinking contest between Hercules and the god Dionysus, right there in the dining room of the rabbi's house. And so it's a reminder that as we look at Israel, one of the things that we're always sort of trying to discern is how can the different peoples who occupy this place live in peace together? And that's not a new question. That's a question that people were navigating in the 1st and 2nd and 3rd centuries, and they found some really beautiful ways to do it, which gives me hope that we can find some really beautiful ways to do it too. Which leads me to my next question. Today is the Feast of Christ the King, which you'll hear more about from George in just a little bit. But Jared, I think one of the most interesting questions for us on this trip, one of the the most interesting aspects of this trip was the fact that we didn't just see ruins and relics and visit museums. We actually got to meet real people who were doing the work of living together in peace and harmony as best they can in the middle of this conflicted space. And to me, that is a beautiful symbol of the coming of the kingdom of God. And so I'd love to know what stood out to you the most among all the different people that we talked to who are doing peace-building work in Israel.
Yeah, for me, some of the most significant conversations we had were with people who are contributing to peace in Israel-Palestine. We met with several groups that generally are bringing together Palestinian and Israeli students, mostly children and young adults, to learn together, mostly around music and the arts. This is necessary because Jewish students and Arab students are educated in segregated schools in Israel. But one of the things that we learned was that this conflict cuts through communities, but it also cuts through people as they try to navigate their own identity, whether Israeli or Palestinian, Arab or Muslim or Christian or whatever the case may be for them. One of the places we visited was a college run by a Palestinian Christian pastor named Dr. Mitri Raheb. And this college focuses on teaching visual and performing arts. And I heard someone ask Dr. Raheb, why, in the midst of this geopolitical turmoil, are you teaching the arts? And his response was that if we're going to find a solution in Israel-Palestine, it's going to take creative thinking and creative solutions. And he said, we are teaching creative thinking as much as the creative arts. And he said also that tumultuous identity that people experience is partly because of the loss of culture and identity. And so he said that by teaching art, one of the vehicles of culture, they're actually reinforcing the identity of young Palestinians. And so contributing to a sort of long-term peace process by cultivating people that will be leaders. I think that his response encapsulates a lot of what we saw, where people are in fact contributing to the kingdom of God, but sort of in the metaphorical back alleys and in a slow way that will contribute to a long-term peace. It really was a beautiful experience.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing, Jared. And thanks again to you, Wilshire, for making it possible for us to go. This was just a tiny little taste of our incredible experiences. There's more to come, so look for that sometime in the future. But again, thank you. You've made us better pastors for giving us the opportunity to go on this trip. Thank you.